Well, hello and welcome to the Paraphrasing workshop, which is part of the Building Your Writing Foundation workshop series. My name is Sharon Arasso, and I am a workshop facilitator with the Academic Success Center. If you have any follow-up questions after today's regarding to the content from the workshop, you're welcome to send me an email at sarasso@rrc.ca. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Red River College Polytechnic campuses are located on the lands of Anishinaabe, Ininiwak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. So for the next half hour or so, we're going to focus on four different areas here. First, we're going to briefly introduce what we mean by paraphrasing and why we do it. Then we're going to look at the difference between paraphrasing and summarizing. We're also going to discuss how to avoid plagiarism and how we sometimes accidentally can plagiarize when we are trying to paraphrase. And finally, we're going to look at 5 steps that can help us paraphrase any text. First of all, introduction to paraphrasing. Well, what is paraphrasing? What do we mean by that? Very basically, it is rewriting information from a source in our own words. When we paraphrase then, our writing should reflect the same meaning of the original source, and it does need to be without bias. So we're not going to include our own opinions or reflections here. We are simply restating what was in the original text. After that, in addition to that, we want to ensure that our paraphrase is in our own voice or our own writing style. And I'm going to get more into that later on in the workshop here. And also, we want to ensure that our paraphrase includes a reference to the source. In most programs at the college here that will be using EPA in text citations or references. For more information on that, we will have a workshop next week on how to do so. So I'm not going to get into that part of this paraphrasing today. So that's a little bit about what paraphrasing is. Sometimes when I work with students, they can feel a little bit uncertain about the word paraphrasing and how to write in one's own words, and it can seem a little bit complex. But I think it's helpful to realize that paraphrasing is not just an academic skill. It's actually something that we do quite regularly in our day-to-day life or in our work, where we take information that we've heard and restate it in our own words for someone else. What are some examples of where we might do this in our day-to-day lives? Well, potentially if you are explaining to someone how to do a specific task and they don't know how to do the task, you may paraphrase, take more complex steps and simplify them as you're explaining to the other person how to do this task. Think about whenever you've explained a more complex concept to a young child. You don't dive in with a lot of complex terminologies and very long loaded sentences. You'll explain things more simply. We do paraphrasing when we're trying to make sure we've understood something correctly. Maybe you're at a business meeting or a group meeting for your college, and as a team, you've decided on specific goals or specific next steps that you're going to do. You may paraphrase back to your group what you've understood to make sure that you understood and you caught all of the appropriate details. We also may do this when a friend is sharing a difficult situation with you. You might say, so what you're saying is, and then paraphrase back to your friend to ensure you've understood correctly, and also show your friend that you were indeed listening to them as they were sharing their struggles with you. So my point is here, we do paraphrase, whether we realize it or not. Now, let's move from paraphrasing in our day-to-day lives back to paraphrasing in an academic context. So why do you think we are asked to paraphrase in academic writing? What's the point or what's the goal of paraphrasing? I want to suggest 2 things here. 1, paraphrasing allows us to take chunks of text from a source and simplify complex ideas or vocabulary to fit our audience and format. It also will allow us as the writer to choose what pieces of information from a source will fit the needs of a writing task. So you may be reading an article or a website or a web page, and as you're reading it, you are determining what from this article, what from this text do I need to use in my own writing for my writing task. Potentially you're writing an argumentative paper. You have a thesis, and now you're developing and supporting that thesis. Or maybe you've made a claim, you made a statement, and now you need to support that statement. You need to provide evidence for that statement, and perhaps you're going to use research to do so. So as you're paraphrasing information from a source, from a text, you are going to be thinking in your mind, how does this fit in to the needs of my specific writing task? Potentially, you will not be including every single detail from the original source if it does not fit in with the need of your writing task. Or the vocabulary that you choose to use, the words that you choose to use as you're writing in your own words will be you also take into consideration your audience and what they will be able to understand. Earlier, I said if you're going to explain a complex idea to a child, you're not going to dive in with all this complex vocabulary. You're going to make adjustments based on your audience's knowledge. And the same thing too, when you're doing academic writing, you will choose your vocabulary based on who you believe will be reading this and what you think is most appropriate for that specific audience group. So we will when we're paraphrasing, we're taking information and adjusting the words based on our audience and format, and we're also going to be able to choose information based on the needs of our writing task. One word of caution, as we're doing this, we do want to be careful not to misrepresent the point of view of the original source. So even though we may simplify vocabulary, even though we may not include every detail from an original text, we want to be careful not to provide a different meaning than what the original authors were intending. Illustrate the idea here of how we can focus on applicable information when paraphrasing. Let's take a look at this scenario. So imagine that two students from the college, one is in a business administration program and one is in a social innovation and community development program. Both in different classes have been asked to write a reflection about the results of the 2023 provincial election that happened here in Manitoba. And both have been asked to support their ideas with research. They may both read the same article from the CBC News about the election. However, the business admin student may be thinking more about how the election will impact business owners in Manitoba. And so that student may choose to paraphrase information from the article that's more about that topic for their reflection. On the other hand, the social innovation student may want to write about how the election will affect supports for low-income families. And so that student may choose to paraphrase information from the article about that specific topic for the reflection. So from the same article, both students will paraphrase information that is applicable to their specific tasks, topics, and audience. I want to now move on to talking about the difference or similarities and differences between paraphrasing and summaries. Some of you may have joined our last workshop 2 weeks ago before Reading Week, where we talked about summarizing, so capturing the big picture and basically getting the main idea of a text. Paraphrasing is slightly different. One thing they do both have in common, though, is for both paraphrasing and summarizing, the writer must use their own words or voice to express the information. So they cannot take chunks of text from the original source and put it into their own writing, or they cannot basically copy the sentence structure while changing a few words and then use that same overall sentence structure in their own writing. They must use their own words or their own voice. A big difference, though, between these two, between paraphrasing and summarizing, is summarizing requires the writer to identify and express the main ideas of the whole source. And as I said, you can go back and check out the workshop from 2 weeks ago. We have a recording online. Paraphrasing, on the other hand, will allow the writer to choose the information from a source that's applicable to their writing task, topic, and audience. So it might not be focused on the overall idea. It may be focused on smaller details within the text, depending on the needs of a specific writing task. Again, as I've said, we do want to ensure that we are accurately representing the point of view of the original source. Now, how do we ensure we've expressed something in our own words without accidentally copying from the original source? Let's move on to talk about plagiarism and how sometimes when attempting to paraphrase, we can accidentally plagiarize. So just to kind of give us kind of an understanding of what plagiarism is, whenever you paraphrase or quote someone else's words or ideas, we must give credit to the original author. And as mentioned already, often in the college, you'll be asked to do that using the APA citation style. So that will involve both an in-text citation and a reference entry. And of course, you can get more information on that next week. If we do not give credit to the original author for their words or their ideas, then this is considered plagiarism, which is an act of academic dishonesty. Because what you are doing, in a sense, is saying, these are my words, even if it's a direct quotation. Or maybe you have written it in your own way, in your own words, but if it wasn't your original idea, if you don't give credit, if you don't let your reader know who gave you that idea, you are telling your reader, this is my idea. So you are misrepresenting the fact that this is not your own original idea. So no matter if you are taking words directly within quotation marks, or if you're writing something in your own words, if it was not your own original idea, you need to give credit to the original author. Sometimes I worked with students and they've attempted to, or they have given credit to the original author. However, they've still plagiarized without realizing it. Paraphrasing can be challenging. Paraphrasing well can be challenging. So sometimes students will rely only on finding words with a similar meaning to other words that were in the original text. So they look for synonyms to replace words from the original text. So this can turn into something that is called synonym swapping, so just changing out words. And this can lead to unintentional plagiarism. When someone synonym swaps, basically they take the sentence from the original text, they keep the sentence as it was, they just change out a few words. The sentence structure, however, has basically stayed the same. This is not an appropriate form of paraphrasing, and this leads to plagiarism charges, even if it was unintentional. I'm going to show you what I mean. Here we have a text. It's about 5 lines long, and then we have a sample paraphrase text. I'm going to walk you through this sentence by sentence to show you how this paraphrase at the bottom part of the screen is not an appropriate paraphrase. The first sentence from the original says, students frequently overuse direct quotations in taking notes. In the paraphrase, the person who wrote this has written, students often use quotes while note-taking. So you'll notice that there's been some attempts to change some words here. There's some synonyms that are being used. Frequently has changed to often. Overuse has been simplified just to use, so a different word form has been used here. Direct quotations has been simplified to quotes, same meaning though. And then note-taking is a slight variation of taking notes. So some attempts have been made to change some word forms and to use synonyms. It still is basically the same sentence though. The sentence structure is exactly the same. The order of the concepts within the sentence has stayed the same. So this is too similar to, the paraphrase text is too similar to the original text. If you look at the next section, in the green on the original text, it says, and as a result, they overuse quotations in the final research paper. In the sample paraphrase, it says, this means that they used too many quotations in their last paper. And as a result, has been converted to this means. They overuse quotations has been changed to they use too many quotations in the final paper, their last paper. So again, we're following the original sentence very closely. Only a few words or phrases have been changed out, words that share the same meaning. You'll notice as well, final research paper has been changed to last paper. So an attempt was made to use a synonym here. Final was changed to last. If you think about the meaning, though, final paper is not the same meaning as last paper. Final paper is indicating the last big assignment someone will have in their course. But if in the paraphrase text where it says their last paper, I'm talking about the most recent paper that's been done. So the meaning of these two things has changed. So in an attempt to use synonyms, the writer of this paraphrase has actually changed the meaning of the original text, which is what we do not want to do. Going on to the next sentence, probably only about 10% of your final manuscript should appear as directly quoted matter, has been converted to, it is likely that simply approximately 10% of your last paper should be quotes. Probably has been changed to, it is likely that. The meaning is actually a little bit different. We use those differently. So again, the meaning of the original text has been changed. Only about the original text has been changed to simply approximately. I don't know how that sounds to you. It's very awkward sounding to me. We wouldn't say that. So again, as this person was changing synonyms word for word, they've actually made the sentence sound quite awkward and not at all the way we would write a sentence in academic writing. And then the rest of the sentence is pretty similar to the original sentence as well. Just to move along here in this last sentence, therefore becomes in conclusion, you should strive, becomes you should attempt, to limit becomes to lessen. So you can see again here, we've taken basically the same sentence structure, just changed a few words, but the sentence structure is basically the same. So this is considered plagiarism. Even though the author of this paraphrase has included an in-text citation, Leicester 1976, even with that, the paraphrase itself is too close to the original. Simply changing synonyms has not made this an appropriate paraphrase. So from this example, we can see synonym swapping results in a few things, or can result in a few things. One, it can result in inaccurate and strange vocabulary choices that don't make sense. Two, it can change the meaning of the original text. And three, it can result in plagiarism because we have not adequately paraphrased. So we want to remember, coming back to the main ideas that we talked about before, paraphrasing must be in our own voice, which includes vocabulary and sentence structure. In the examples that we saw in the previous slide, although the vocabulary has often been simplified, the sentence structure has not been changed, and therefore it is not okay. It is not an appropriate paraphrase. So the question then stands, how can we help ourselves? How can we ensure that we are indeed paraphrasing appropriately? Because as I mentioned, often when I work with students, some of their plagiarism, it's been unintentional. They did not intend to plagiarize. They thought simply changing words out was enough. And as we've seen, that is not enough. So what can we do to ensure that we do not unintentionally plagiarize? I want to suggest 5 steps to you, which will help you paraphrase texts as you're doing your writing assignments. First one is read and identify the main idea of the text. Second is take notes. Third, very simply walk away. 4 is write your paraphrase. And 5 is check for plagiarism. I'm going to go through each of these in turn. So first of all, if you are going to accurately state someone else's ideas in your own words, you must understand what that idea is. You must understand what the original authors are intending to say, and that implies careful reading. So you want to read and identify the main idea of the text. I would suggest to read the text more than once, 2-3 times, and it depends on the text. Some texts are easier to understand quickly, other texts will take a bit more work, but make sure that you can identify the topic and the main idea. What I mean by the topic is, what's the overall idea that the author is writing about? You could probably summarize this for yourself in 1 or 2 words, highlighting the general subject that the author is talking about. But you also want to identify the main idea that the authors are discussing in their text. And this might be summarized as a statement the author is making about the topic and what the text is mostly about. You could potentially summarize it in a sentence, but it will be more complete and more specific than the topic itself. So before getting into paraphrasing, you need to first read and understand the topic and main idea of the text that you will be paraphrasing. From there, I would suggest to take notes. Now, a lot of students like to highlight a text. Maybe it's on their computer screen, or maybe they printed it out. That can be a useful tool as you're reading. I would still recommend to also take notes after that. It might be on your computer screen, it might be on a piece of paper. But taking notes will be a very helpful tool, and I'll explain why in a moment. As you're taking notes, do not write down full sentences. I would recommend to take point form notes. Wherever possible, try to use symbols to replace words. Of course, you have to make sure that you remember what the symbols mean, but you could use an equal sign, an arrow sign, a plus sign, or whatever makes sense to you. What the idea here is minimize the amount of words you are using to communicate the ideas that are being expressed in the original text that you are going to want to paraphrase. As you're writing down your notes, focus on key words. You can look for synonyms to replace key terms if necessary, if applicable. It's good to use synonyms as long as you're certain that it's an accurate use and accurate meaning. Earlier when I talked about synonym swapping, the danger with synonyms and only using synonyms was it's not enough. But as you're taking notes, you can definitely use synonyms, and that will help you as you write your own sentences later. As you're taking notes, as you're thinking through the information, look up words that you don't know. Help yourself gain a better understanding of what the original text is saying. If you are paraphrasing a longer text, you might not need to include all of the details that are in the text. Try to think critically about what you're going to want to use in your own paraphrase. So take notes, do not use full sentences, use only point form, and try to limit the amount of words as much as possible, still ensuring that you will remember what the ideas are that you want to paraphrase. After taking careful notes, like after you, oh, sorry, I jumped ahead of myself. Here's an example of how this could work with the earlier text that we saw. So we have that same original text there. The topic might be defined as students' use of quotes. The main idea may be stated as sorry about that. So the notes may be students direct quotes and notes leads to too many quotes in paper, quotes max 10% of papers, and then the source there. So you can see we've gotten the main ideas from that excerpt from this original text. Some words we have to use from the original text, like here we have a stat 10%. You don't have to look for a synonym for that, as long as the rest of your notes, or as long as the rest of your paraphrase is not following the sentence structure of that specific sentence, you should be fine. But wherever possible, if you can, try to find synonyms to replace the main ideas from the original text. After taking the notes, the next step would be to walk away. And the reason I say this is because if you've been reading something very carefully, thinking about it a lot, it's very challenging to write a paraphrase when the original text is really fresh in your mind. Remember, the goal here is to write it in your own words. How can you write it in your own words if the words from the original text are really clear and really fresh in your mind? So try giving yourself a bit of a mental break. A break that's long enough for you to kind of forget about how the authors had worded their original ideas. Maybe you want to do a different assignment that you've been working on. Maybe you can even wait a whole day to do so. I don't know, just go wash the dishes or something like that. But try giving yourself a small break between the step of taking your notes and moving into actually writing your paraphrase. From there, we want to move on to writing our paraphrase. So when you write your paraphrase, you want to start with the main idea and then add the details. In the writing stage, only rely on your notes. Do not even look back at the original text. Again, if you're looking back at the original text, you're going to have that original sentence structure in your mind. It's going to be more challenging to write your own sentences. But by using your notes, and because the notes were in point form, you are now going to be forced to create your own sentences. You will have no choice. You will have to create your own sentences. And so you will have a better opportunity, a better chance of creating sentences that are original to you in your own voice and your own writing style, but still accurately communicating the idea from the original source. So it might look something like this. We have the notes there on the side. If I were to only rely on that, a paraphrase for using these notes may be something like, students should avoid using quotes in their notes because this results in too many quotes in their papers. Quotes should only make up 10% of a paper. And then we have the the in-text citation. Now, we've done careful thinking, we've taken the notes, we gave ourselves a break, we only relied on our notes for the paraphrase. There's a chance we could still have written something too close to the original. So I would recommend, even after following these first 4 steps, go back and check your work for plagiarism, for accidental plagiarism. Some things you may want to be looking for are, did you use 3 or more words from the original in the same order and form? Are your sentences very similar in structure to the original? Is your information listed in the same order and at the same level of detail as the original? Those may be indicators that you should go back and double check. Give me just a moment, please, sorry. So if we wanted to double check our phrase sample to the original, here we have the original at the top and the paraphrase at the bottom. And going through the checklist on the side, we can see there are not 3 words in the same order and form. Sentence structure is indeed different. The information is similar in order, but it's not at the same level of detail. Some of the information has been omitted, so it can still work for this case. We've stayed true to the meaning, which is very important as well. The paraphrase text is simpler and more concise than the original, and we have included a citation from the original source. Excuse me one more time, sorry. All right, so by checking, we can make sure that we've avoided even accidentally plagiarizing, and we've covered ourselves that way. All right, so that brings us to the end of this particular workshop. But in summary, I'd like to just remind us that paraphrasing is an essential writing skill. As in all skills, it's something that we can build upon and improve upon. When we are paraphrasing a text, it needs to be written in our own voice, our own vocabulary, maintaining the same meaning as the original, and often we'll find it's simpler and more concise than the original. Paraphrasing and summarizing have 2 different purposes, and paraphrasing will allow you as the writer to choose information that is relevant to your task, your topic, and your audience. When we're paraphrasing, we don't want to simply change out synonyms. That is not considered appropriate paraphrasing. To help us paraphrase appropriately, though, we can use these 5 steps. Read the text carefully and identify the main idea. Take notes, walk away, write, and finally check for plagiarism again. All right, thank you for joining me today. If you want more information about our services and our supports at the Academic Success Center, you can locate us online or at the library at both campuses. I would welcome some feedback from you on this workshop. You can scan the QR code there if you're able to. This link should be live for the next 24 hours or so. I'm also going to put a link into the here if you prefer to access the survey that way. So it should be in the text there for you. But we would love to hear from you and hear if this workshop has helped you and how it's helped you, or if there's something we can do in addition to this workshop to help you with this particular topic. Next week, we are going to conclude the Building Your Writing Foundation series with APA citations and formatting. You can access this workshop using the same link that you used to join me today. So I welcome you to come next Wednesday, March 6th at 12:15. Thanks again for joining me. Here's my name again and my email. If you have any follow-up questions, you're welcome to send an email my way, and I'd be happy to hear from you. I'm going to stop recording, and then I'll take any specific questions if we have.